These days, Hollywood studios seem to be increasingly willing to pay for big movies. Some of the biggest blockbusters to hit the big screens in recent years have had astronomical budgets. But the question is whether or not the high prices were worth it. Well, I'll let you decide that after you look at the list of movies, which isn't ranked though, but I'll tell you what I think. So without any further delay, let's get into the video. The first movie on our list is John Carter, Between Two Worlds, 2012. Do you remember this movie? It's a curious event when one of the most expensive movies in history is also a highly forgettable movie that hardly anyone talks about anymore, being erased entirely for younger generations. The truth is that this ambitious move by Disney to a super production in live action is based on the classic tale by writer Edgar Rice Burroughs, who was behind the creation of the character Tarzan, for example, the source of numerous successful film productions, dating back to the same time, of the beginnings of the seventh art. Burroughs' short story, The Princess from Mars, which Disney turned into John Carter, actually inspired everything in the cultural realm, including George Lucas in the creation of the Star Wars saga. Turns out, arriving very late in the game, John Carter looked like some copy. When the script fails in creativity and emotion, things get even more complicated. John Carter cost a simple $264 million to produce. And Han Solo 2018, The Rise of Skywalker 2019. Well, coming back to the Star Wars franchise, we now jump right in, increasing the joke by $10 million. Is it good for you? Now we find ourselves at the top, with the most expensive films in the franchise. And yes, you heard that right, I said films in the plural. Since you're going to break down the door, let it be done in a double dose. The last two Star Wars movies in cinema were also the most expensive. And well, they fall into the category of films that did not reach expectations. With that fact, we hope that the big studios will rethink their strategies and invest less money in a product that can only return them headaches and losses, especially the executives in charge of taking care of a universe as dear and rich as Star Wars. With this last trilogy, for example, it became clear that those responsible did not have a clear plan, letting directors dare in their films only to later deny their concepts and erase them in the sequel. This is the summary of The Rise of Skywalker, a film that tried to please everyone and ended up pleasing no one. Han Solo, on the other hand, proved to be a problematic production from the start, starting with being a project that no one asked for and ending with the kickoff of the original directors, the more than creative minds of Phil Lord and Christopher Miller, thus opting for safety by Ron Howard. And the result? Well, an adventure without much life. Both The Rise of Skywalker and Han Solo were produced for the $275 million trifle. Let's talk about Batman vs. Superman: Dawn of Justice, 2016. This Warner DC product was set to be one of the biggest hits in recent entertainment history. The studio had in its hands two iconic characters who are true marketing pieces to make money, and whose trajectory in solo films in cinema proved just that. This was the first big meeting of these lucrative titans on the big screen. The result was supposed to transcend the feature film and become a true pop culture phenomenon. Well, as we know, what happened was not quite that. Many point the responsibility for the failure to director Zack Snyder, others for the studio's anxiety in wanting to sow a cinematic universe like that of rival Marvel, without having gone through the previous stages. When greed overwhelms ideas, even with so much money invested, the budget was $263 million and the result is never what you expected, right? Next is Avengers: Infinity War, 2018. The reason for the success of Marvel movies, well, almost all of them, is to work their characters and plots so well to the point of becoming not only part of a cinematographic work, but true social movements. Even in fanciful plots, with characters wearing colorful uniforms, there is great humanity, which results in immediate identification in their narratives. Thus, we understand the motivations of a tyrant like Thanos, Josh Brolin, who truly believes in the altruism of his actions, to erase half of the universe from existence, so that the other half does not lack resources due to overpopulation. Extremism? Certainly. However, here on Earth, we have the same problem. Infinity War is a lesson in how to deliver as big a production as possible, taking from it the best it could offer. This, of course, required a worthy budget, and it cost $316 million. In this case, a valid investment. Following Avengers: Infinity War is Avengers: Endgame, 2019. As said, the plan for the third Avengers was to split it into two parts, a path that Warner wanted to have taken as well. The proposal of a sewn and episodic universe, as the old matinee series were created, with each session making the public look forward to the next week where such an adventure would be concluded, entirely made up in productions of hundreds of millions of dollars, is something unprecedented. Marvel Studios has turned its cinema into a comic book structure, and if before this art was not respected or treated correctly by studios and executives, now the MCU pays back, making the movie industry fall to its knees before its successful formula, dictating trends and rules of the new game. After all, why own a franchise that becomes a worldwide fever when you can have several and still connect them? With Infinity War, Marvel Studios left the world in pain, waiting for a conclusion to the terrifying events, and a year later it finally delivered such answers. Of course, for completing, all the stakes would be raised, including the budget, which jumped to $356 million. What about Avengers: Age of Ultron 2015? The most expensive Marvel movie and the second most expensive movie in general is Avengers. However, whoever thought it would be the Infinity War or Endgame juggernauts is wrong. The most expensive production in the MCU is Age of Ultron, also one of their most irregular. The first Avengers, 2012, with a budget of $220 million, proved to be a resounding success, showing what could be done, surpassing the billion mark and on top of becoming the third highest grossing in the world at the time, behind only James Cameron's double, Titanic 1997 and Avatar 2009. Much of the credit went to the work's commander, director Joss Whedon. So imagine the anticipation for the sequel to this true milestone for films of the genre. 3 years later, Age of Ultron was off the paper, and well, let's just say it wasn't as good as the original. In fact, the work ended up costing part of Whedon's sanity, which soon after left the franchise, taking a break from the command of mega blockbusters. However, one thing that was better about the original was the separate budget for the production, which reached an absurd $365 million. Of course, Pirates of the Caribbean on Stranger Tides 2011 will make the list. The most expensive movie in the history of cinema is a Disney production, but this one has nothing to do with Marvel Studios. Perhaps it's not that hard to believe, as such productions are extremely megalomaniacal, but the fourth Pirates of the Caribbean is the biggest budget movie of all time. As said, At World's End is one of the most inflated budget record holders and had the proposal to end the franchise. But in an age of recyclings, reimaginings, remakes, and reboots, Disney didn't really intend to end one of its biggest golden gooses. Thus, 4 years after the end, a new chapter was made, this time without the original team. Thus, director Gore Verbinski of the original trilogy leaves, and Rob Marshall, Chicago, enters. Co-stars Orlando Bloom and Keira Knightley also left for the entry of Spanish star Penelope Cruz. But since producer Jerry Bruckheimer is the boss of the franchise, once we have Johnny Depp doing his crazy things again in the role of Jack Sparrow, we didn't really feel that anything had changed. Nothing differs from the previous ones, be it the look or any concept. Even the direction sounds identical. What really changed was the astronomical budget raised to $379 million. In terms of collection, however, On Stranger Tides comes in below its predecessor, with $20 million less at the box office. Now we wrap it up with Pirates of the Caribbean: At World's End 2007. Oh yes, when it comes to Pirates of the Caribbean, what started out as a shot in the dark by Disney proved to be an extremely profitable franchise and one of the most beloved in entertainment cinema, largely due to the childish appeal it has. The studio's plan was to mirror what Warner had done with The Matrix and earlier with The Lord of the Rings, and shoot 2 films at once, releasing them within a year. And if the first part, Dead Man's Chest, had a budget of $225 million, to continue Jack Sparrow's adventures, the closure of the then trilogy closed with a flourish for the change of $300 million, the same amount spent by Warner in Justice League. So that concludes today's video. If you found the video helpful, give us a thumbs up, and don't forget to share the video with your friends and family. Thanks for watching. See you next time.